In this video, I want to talk about setting up a point-and-click controller for a player. And also, I want to talk about, as I promised in a previous video, using Probuilder to prototype your scenes. So I'm going to try to show them together. So what we have, I'm using the 3D game kit, which you can see here when I have this kit tools. I talked about setting that up in the previous video and converting this Bender character to the 3D game kit avatar. It was basically humanoid to generic rig conversion. But this one I want to talk about this Probuilder add-on, which you can install using the package manager, and just search for Probuilder. You can install it. If you have the 3D game kit set up already as in your project, you'll already have Probuilder set up along with Polybrush and Filter LOD. What I want to talk about though is how to use the two together. So I've made this using the standard assets, and I'll put a link to them because I know they're not linked onto my Unity asset store anymore, but I'm using the AI Navmesh agent controller, third person, for the Unity assets, mainly because that's the player controller is set up to work with AI. For that, there's an AI script, but I've added this point-and-click player script. I'm going to show you how that works first. So let's go to that. And if you look under, here it is, point-and-click script. I'll just double-click on it and show you what it's doing in Visual Studio. I'm going to link to this on my GitHub. So all we're doing in this is, I'm going to make it bigger so you can see, is you've got the normal system collections generic, Unity Engine, and you just need to add using Unity Engine AI. And then we've got this public class point-click player. And I've created a layer mask, the object that receives the clicks. So we're going to be targeting a layer for collision. And then we have this private Navmesh agent, which is just the agent itself. And then in start, we set my agent equals component get Navmesh agent. So that's this, my agent. We're just setting it to whatever the Navmesh agent is. And then we set, I'm setting cursor visible true because some of the scripts in the 3D kit or the 3D game kit disable the cursor on playback. I'm not sure which ones. I had to debug that for a while, but you want to, for a point-and-click adventure, you want to have the cursor enabled, or you want to be able to enable a pointer of some kind so you can touch-click to get to set the point. And then all we're doing on update is if we get a mouse button down, left mouse, cast a ray from the camera to the point where the mouse position was, raycast, set the hit info to the raycast hit, and then if physics raycast, we cast that with the hit info for a distance of like 100 meters, and then to the object receive clicks, and we'll set the destination hit info to the point. And all that's doing is then saying, okay, so my agent, the Navmesh agent that we have, we want to set its destination everywhere that we click so that we will make it navigate to that point. Here's how it works. So if we hit play, we have this character here, and I can just click, and wherever I click, he will run to. Okay. Now it's using the Navmesh agent, so we have to have a Navmesh set up. So if we look at that, we can select this plane. If we go to navigation, or if you don't have the navigation set up as a tab, you can go to Windows. I think General. AI, and then navigation. And then that will have your Navmesh depending on how it's set up. So we're going to get into how this is, we're going to build this out actually separately. But what I have here is a bunch of Probuilder objects that I've just placed in the scene in some boxes. And then on each one of those, you need to make sure that they're set to static or set them to Navmesh static. It's the same thing. And then give them a target. So walkable, not walkable, or jump. So not walkable would be like a collision object. Jump is just something that will set up the jumpability of the object depending on the agent's settings, whether or not they can jump it. And then we haven't had areas yet, but then if you bake for the map, and for that you want to, set generate off-mesh links, and what that does is it will automatically generate these mesh jumps. Basically, I've got a jump mesh for the steps, and then I've got these off-mesh links that it's automatically baked based on this baked agent size. So 4. If I set that step height to, or drop height and drop distance to smaller, so like 1. Watch what happens with the drop mesh links, or the mesh links. They climb down on the steps here. And I'll show you how these work, because you can actually add your own Navmesh links as objects. So I've made one right here where I've just dragged these points to make it so it can jump off the top if we click. Anyway, I go into Navmesh in another tutorial. You can look it up. All it is just, this is the mesh that tells an AI agent where it can go. And you need to set that up appropriately for your scene. So if I set the drop height to like 5 and jump distance to 5, and we hit bake, you're going to see these off mesh links go up much higher. So he'll be able to jump off of that depending on where his navigation point is set to. So if he's up here, let me just show that. So if we go up on the steps, if we go up here, notice that I've got these cameras that change, and that will change as well. But if I set him to go down here, clicking on this floor, he'll jump off of the mesh to go there, okay? And that's just because those Navmesh links are there. If he didn't have those, he'd go all the way around and then come around there, so he won't jump off. So it's just adding extra behavior to him so that he will jump instead of going all the way down the steps. Depending on your use case, you may want those, you may not. So I'm going to make those a little smaller. The other thing is that the density of these, how close these are, how many you have, is also based off of the Navmesh agent, its radius. So if we set the agent radius to like 4.4, notice this gets thicker. And then when we bake, those will be bigger, but there'll be fewer of them. And it's a kind of an optimization. But also too, the width that they can walk, or where the agent can walk up next to an object will change in terms of the Navmesh positioning. So these steps are going to get a lot narrower. You won't be able to get him to step on the side. And depending on the overlap for this jump point, he may not be able to jump off of it. If it's out of position, you may have to shift that a little bit. So I'm going to leave that. I want to talk about the camera rig setup as well, and then we're going to go and build this out. So you notice I've got all of these cube boxes. Those serve multiple purposes. They're obstacles for the Navmesh, but they're also blocking this Clearshot camera that I have set up, which is a Cinemachine Clearshot camera. And if you look at all the cameras that I have around the scene, here's one. Then I've got them positioned everywhere. And what's going on is that as he moves around the scene, this Clearshot camera will try to find the best shot to position him, and will behave, it'll just select the shots based on how many cameras I've added. So if we click over to here, there's a Cinemachine Clearshot camera right there that's close up. Same thing over to here. And then if we go around the corner, notice it had to swap when he got out of the shot for the clear. So if we go back here, there he is. So this affects, this gets tricky in terms of setting up where he can go, and also being able, with a point and click, where you can actually click, because if the Clearshot camera can't quite, I obviously can't click over here. If I click on this scene, this object, he just goes up to the corner because it's part of my clickable surface. I've made it part of the environment. If I didn't want these to be part of the environment in terms of clicking, I can select these objects and then move them in the layer from environment to, well, I think default's one of the ones I have set up. Let's add it to level. They'll still get baked, but the colliding object that's causing these Cinemachine cameras to be able to click. So if I click here, no click, nothing happens now over here, but if I click on the ground, because it's on the environment, he can go there. So that's a way of sort of another optimization where we can only click where we can click. And then you can enable cursors in script that would say, this is a clickable object, this isn't, and it would change the GUI so that you could see. But that's beyond the scope of this tutorial. I just wanted to show you, right now I'm just showing you that we've got this standard AI Navmesh agent that normally would be an AI NPC, but we're using it now for our player character, along with this point and click and Navmesh agent stuff, in order to create an alternative interface for gameplay. So let's go and create this thing from scratch. But before I do that, I want to save. Let's see, do I want to save him? Actually, no, I don't want to save him. I'm just going to make a new scene. And no, I won't make a new scene still, because I'm going to go into detail about how to do this Probuilder stuff as well. So if you normally in GameKit, if you do this kit tools, create new scene, it's going to create Ellen's third-person character and a camera rig and depth volume, all this other stuff, which is fine if we're working with the 3D game kit and that's what we want to generate. But because this is a tutorial and I want to sort of show you from scratch how to set all this up, I'm going to do it from scratch. So instead, we will, in Assets, right-click, and just create a new scene. It's just going to be an empty scene. Right here. We'll call this point and click. Then we'll double click on it. We won't save this. Now we have an empty scene. Sorry, it's springtime, so I've got a little bit of allergies. So we could we can generate a Navmesh with just about anything. So if I want, I can just go ahead and make it plain. So game object, create 3D plane. We can set that at 0, 0, so we know the center of our world. And just to mark this as being different, I will give it a material besides the Probuilder material so it looks a little different. Let's put a checker on it if we can. I'll make a material. I have a material folder, so I'm just going to make it loose in the assets folder. Create material. Let's call this check. If you wonder why I'm always making these check materials, it's just so I have a sense of scale based on the scene, so I can kind of tell what I'm working on. And then we'll just add a check material if we have one to the scene. Yeah, there it is, the default checker. Let's go with the darker one. It's too big right now as it is. What's my size? 5. So we want it to be, let's make it 1. So that means that these checks, sorry, these checks are, excuse me, I'm trying to give a sense of scale here. So these checks are, the plane is 1 by 1 in terms of scale. And then the checks would be half of that. So there'll be a ½ meter. So if I make it 2, then the checks are 1. Okay. So now if I go let's do 100. So let's go 200. Then I need to change my check count by modifying the tiling right here to 100, so that they represent 1 meter. Hopefully that makes sense. So now we have a 100 or a 200 by 200 meter plane, and each check represents a single meter. If I wanted them to represent a ½ meter, I could just now change my plane to 100 by 100 based on the size that we saw earlier. Same thing happens kind of by default with Probuilder, and I'll explain that next. So now we have this plane. It has a mesh collider and a material. Let's go ahead and put our bender character on it right here. So you can tell it's a huge plane. Actually, I was wrong about the scale. Or am I wrong about his scale? Pretty sure he's 2 meters tall. So the scale here, let me add a box. So yeah, that box, let's put it at 0. So that's a meter. So then let's scale our checkboard down to, looks like 5 or 6. So let's go down to 60. Make that 30. $20. All right, this seems to be pretty much the same. It's a little bit off, but you get the idea. So, and I'm not sure that these default cubes in Unity are meter by meter, but usually they stand for something so that you get some sense of scale. Same in Blender they are, but unless you've set them to something different. So, yeah, let's see. We'll just look at it relative to his. Yeah, so yeah, he's like 2 meters tall, I think, unless I've changed his scale, but close. And then these would be slightly different. I'm not sure why they represent something, because at some point they should be representative of a meter. I guess they are, just for some reason they look a little different. If I set the cube right smack on top, then they are. Okay, so anyway, so now we have still a large plane, whatever this scale represents. I'm guessing 10 meters perhaps, I'm not sure. Whatever the plane came in at. Anyway, so we have this scale, this plane, we have a collision on it. We have him, and all he has on him right now is his armature and this animator, which is empty. So what I want to do is I want to make him work as just a point-and-click navigable player. So let's go ahead and just put him in the player. So this is, again, all of these layers are still set up because we're using the game kit. All of these come in and stay set up in the project, the layers. And it's just got a lot for different game setups. The player character. So there's characters, but then there's also, wait, is it? Yeah, there, player by default. We'll move him. So he's a player. And what I was saying is that under project settings, physics, these are the way the layers are set up to collide. So a player can collide with checkpoint collider, cameras, terrain, water geometry, vegetation, characters, environment, vehicles. It's just an optimization for the physics engine. And you saw how we could use that to kind of filter the point and click so that they only work on objects that we want them to work on. So that he's not so dark, I'm going to go ahead and bake the lighting. Nothing is set for static right now, so it'll all be dynamic. And then we'll just use the directional light as our sun source and generate lighting. Okay, so now we have the ambient lighting going on as best we can. I've explained what that means in others, but you can see it's only using the environment for his reflection map, not the floor. So let's make this point and click plane. We'll add the controls for him. So in order to do that, like I said, by default, I'm using the standard assets, which I have copied and pasted. I'll put a link to those in the video on my GitHub so you can get access. It's just the characters and a couple of other things necessary, but particularly the third person character. And under prefabs, I want this AI third person. In other videos, I've talked about this third person character, but in this one, we're going to use this AI character instead. So you can see how tall Bender is compared to him. It's a little bit too big, so I'll scale him down a little bit. It's not that important that you do, but just in case. So we want to copy all of the stuff that's on this prefab over to Bender. So we'll copy the rigid body. Paste. Capsule collider. And you may have to adjust that. We'll leave it for now. And then the Navmesh agents. And the AI character component. So this is the this is the part that basically gives you some control or something to target in his third person character controller, which we need to set up here in the controller. So we'll set that. A lot of these controllers come over with the game kit. The third person character controller or animator controller is standard assets, so make sure you have that. If you don't have those installed, you won't see this. So it's this, and it's what it's again the if I select that, it's this state machine that's set up for him, and it has layers, but if you look at the perimeters, it's got this forward, turn, crouch, on ground, jump leg. These are all the default parameters. These are, if you want to learn how to use a state machine or set one up yourself, these are things you add that can be targeted with script that allow these different states to go be activated. So we have him. We can lose this guy now. He has a Navmesh agent on him, and it's targeting humanoid Navmesh again because I have this game kit. We also have a Chomper, which is an alternative Navmesh agent, but stick with the humanoid, which I think is the default. And if we go to our navigation mesh, we want to make sure, select this plane, set it to Navmesh static, which again is the same as setting it to static up here. And then we can set it to walkable. Look at our agent settings, and then bake. So notice we don't have any drop height, we don't have any jump distance, which means that in terms of baking, we also don't have generate off mesh links checked, which means that it won't bake any. We don't have any to generate right now, so we just get this straightforward plane in terms of a walk mesh. We'll add more to it in a minute. But now, if we hit play, we still don't have our point and click script. And he's falling because I forgot to set, as I always do. He's going to get this falling animation unless you go and set the ground check distance to something besides that 0.1. Let's make it 3. This is very dependent upon your size. So if you've noticed, I was careful about setting up my scene so that I had a kind of idea of what scale I'm working at. So I know that he's roughly 2 meters tall because I looked at the box. I got the check set. This is all based off 1 unit being a meter in terms of metrics, working in a meter scale. And that this means that it's casting a ray from him down to the ground for 1/3 of a meter to see if he is on the ground. If he is, he's considered grounded and he will play. If he's not, he's falling. So by setting that to 0.1, it basically isn't casting the ray far enough from whatever it's wherever it's casting from, probably his origin point. It's not casting it far enough and finding that he's on the ground. So now if we hit play, he should fall and stand on the ground and do his idle animation like that. Okay, that works. Now we need to be able to point and click. So I've created this script. It's just, again, it'll be on the GitHub. We can just drag that onto him. I thought we could. Well, we'll add it. It'll just be under scripts if you've got it in your project. It should show up under scripts. And then point click player. There it is. And we need now, in order to be able to target this, we need to take this plane. Right now it's on the default layer, which means it would be clickable because I think, well, we don't have a layer set up for him. But by default it's set for nothing. So if we set it to default, now it'll receive clicks. So if we click here, he'll walk to there. Click over here, he'll walk. So wherever we change it, he'll go. Okay, he's floating a little bit off the ground, but probably what we want to do is, instead of just setting for default, because a lot of things that we'll add to the scene will be on that default layer, we can set this to select the plane and set it to environment, which he will still collide with. So remember, physics-wise, he is a player, and based on what I showed you in terms of the layer collision matrix, he's set so he can collide with certain things. If we set it so this is on level, he'll fall through the ground. Well, I thought he would. Let's try. Props. I know he's not set to collide with those. Could have oh, wait. No, I thought he would, but I might be misunderstanding. Certain things about his character controls will not collide appropriately, but it may be just that the collisions won't get registered for certain things, but physics, it may still just calculate if there's a physics object on it. Anyway, I want to set this for environment because I know that the two are registered to collide in the layer matrix. So if we hit play, just to double check, okay, good. And then what we want is, let me think, let's fix his floating on the ground a little bit. That would be in the capsule collider. We'll just shift it like 9 and see what happens. No, he's still, oh, never mind. I know what it is. It's not the collider. This is something I ran into in the other. Let's go back to 8. It's actually the Navmesh agent. That's why he didn't fall through the ground, because there's actually a Navmesh, because he's got the Navmesh agent. He's set to automatically collide with that. So let me just point that out again. So let's set this back to 8. If I turn off the rigid body's there. If I turn off capsule collider, he doesn't have a capsule collider anymore, but he still is on this Navmesh because he's got a Navmesh agent. It's making it so that he's stuck to what we generated here. And if you look at that Navmesh, you can see it floats a little bit above the ground. So what we can do is, if we want to get it closer, under the bake height, I believe, let's make the agent size 1 and the step height 2. Max slope. So this is one of the things you're going to see, where if the step height isn't big enough, the max slope will be too much. So you have to kind of mess around with this. You won't be able to go up certain slopes. And then I'll set the drop height to 1 and a jump distance of 1. Agent height, agent radius. Make it 2.5. That might make it get a little closer to the mesh. We'll see. We'll bake. Yeah, you see where it dropped down much closer to the ground. Let's see which one did that though. So we'll make this 0.5 again and bake. Still close to the ground, so it's actually the step height. Wait, maybe it was the drop height. Let's just set these back to 0 and see. Yeah, so it was the step height. So now it's pretty flush to the ground, so he'll be on top of it. Well, I thought he would be. Let's see. Oh, I have to set the layer. So because I set the environment, or the plane to the environment, come down to here and then set this to environment so that it'll receive the clicks. And you can set multiple things, so you can click and or click again, so it'll be environment, Navmesh, whatever, which we may not want to have everything that's on the Navmesh. So now when he comes closer, he still floats on the ground, and that's the Navmesh floating. Or maybe Navmesh agent changes height. We want that to be 2. The radius 2.5. Nope, that's obstacle avoidance. So you can see how it changes the cylinder around him. So let's make it 0.5. And it should be on the ground, but I think the base offset, maybe if we make it like, can we make it negative 0.1? Yeah, that shifts it up a little bit, so he'll be a little bit lower on the ground. I've been wondering about this for a while. Yeah, now he's standing on the ground. All right, so that's good. Good to know. That's better, much better. All right, so if you have floating agents, you don't have to change your Navmesh agent. You just shift the base offset, whichever direction you need them to float, okay? All right. While we're at that, him walking that speed, we could maybe make him go faster. So let's make it 8 on the speed. So now when we click, he should run instead. Yeah, there you go. That's better. All right. So now we have him pointing and clicking. We want to make it so that he can avoid obstacles, and we want a camera to follow him around. So let's add, while we're setting this up, let's just add a Cinemachine script. We want to add the Clearshot camera, this one. And when you do that, it'll automatically have one camera in that Clearshot that is set up by default, because this is more like a group script, and then it's going to have a series of cameras that it's going to want to use to go choose between. So let's pull the camera up and shift it somewhere in the scene, however far we want it. Let's put it there. And the main thing is we need to, either in the main Clearshot script or in one of these, we need to target something for the camera to look at so that it knows what it's trying to follow. So I'm going to put it in the actual parent script, the group script. And rather than targeting some part of him, I'm going to make it so that he has an object that we can shift around in case we want to animate it or something with a timeline based on some interaction in the game. We may want the camera to look somewhere else, like he's looking at something. And if we target him, we'll have no control over that. We'd have to move him to get the camera to move. So what we want to do is add a game object, empty. And this will just be just a little empty object, and we'll call it camera target. And let's just find it and get it centered somewhere. In this case, we'll act like it's part of him and put it in his head for now. And then make it a child of the Bender group so that it moves with him. Yeah. And then the CM VCAM1 can look at that camera target. So if you go to scene, the scene tab, we're looking at that. And the last thing you need with a virtual camera when you add it, or any camera that you add to this Clearshot group, is a collider, an extra collider, which is part of the extensions, or you can just add this Cinemachine collider, or you can add a component Cinemachine collider script. And you want it to collide against something, one of our layers, right? And you want to, so we'll set it so that it is colliding with the environment. Not that there's anything to collide with, it's a flat plane, but yeah, set it to collide with the environment and set it to avoid obstacles. This is the part that will make it swap cameras. If you don't have this avoid obstacles there, it'll just keep looking at them based on some of the other options. So we're going to leave it at that. And then play. So now this camera should look at him as we tell him to move around the scene. And since there's just one camera, it's kind of like, so what? It's just, we can click him all the way to the end of this plane and he'll go and the camera will just keep following him. So what we want to do is add more cameras, and then we'll make some obstacles for him to move through. So let's go ahead and make the obstacles first. Let's say we're going to make this a town with some alleyways or something like that. And actually, I was thinking about making like some height ground, but I'm going to keep it flat for now. This will work on grounded stuff as well, and maybe we'll add that in a second. But for now, I just want to make some odd-shaped buildings that were just boxy buildings. I don't want to make boxes this time. I just want to make something that's like a building shape. So I'm actually going to use the Probuilder for that, which is, again, part of the game kit. You can install it. It's a great kind of object modeling tool within Unity once you install it. I'm going to add it down here, just drag the tab to be part of this down here so I can see. And I'm going to go new poly shape. And that will let you click this path. And once you finish it, then you can extrude the shape up. The thing I love about Probuilder is that it automatically does the UV mapping for you. And it's at a scale of 1 to 1 meter. And it finds the shapes, and it's got some nice UV tools as well, automatically set up for it. That's an easy way to make this odd-shaped kind of canyon-y thing. I'll do another. And I'll just click. I'll make a kind of diverging path. Make a taller one there. And then I'll do a different one here, so we're going to make like a Y split. Not being too careful, because I'm not being that cautious about what I'm doing here, but I do want to. All right, so there's that. Now to make it even more tricky, I want to make some sections that go across from point to point, like some arches and stuff. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to show you a trick for doing anything in Unity. If in Unity you have a 3-button mouse, and you want to be able to position an object relative to a plane, you can middle mouse button click, and that will set your camera look at point to that position, so that now when we go to do a new poly shape, I can draw it across the surface of this plane and extrude out from that. And then if I wanted to edit that, like I don't want this thing to be that high, I can just grab that and pull it down. The UVs change. And then maybe, I'm not even sure if Bender can walk under this because it's pretty low. So you see why I like this tool, is it's pretty easy to edit with and do some stuff on the fly. So I'm adding that in particular because I want it to change cameras if for some reason it can't find the shot relative to that object. So if for some reason it blocks the shot there, it'll swap cameras based on some aerial view or something. In fact, let me select this plane. Just select this face and extrude that a little higher so that I don't get an easy shot there that way. And I'll add one more. So I'm actually going to make kind of a hill start here that will, I'm going to make it go across, so it's going to go up to the top of this building. So in order to do that, I can start here. So middle mouse button click, and I'm going to select poly shape. I'm just going to draw this shape right here. Pull that out. And then from there I can go and extrude additional faces. I'm just holding down the shift button. I'm going to make these go down into the ground, or I'll edit them later. So I'm kind of making a street that will kind of have a slope. You'll see how this works in a sec. And let's rotate these. Trying to rotate it that way. W and shift, just extruding it down some more. We'll edit it. That's sometimes the rotate's really hard to move or select. So I'm just creating a little bit extra slope. And then I'll show you how this is going to settle out here. Just pulling that down so that it sort of starts the slope a little early. I'll pull this back. So there's a ramp. I can select these faces, pull them back this way. Making sure that it's not so steep that he can't walk up it. There may be a point here where it is because of this angle. So I'm just going to use that. I think that looks good. And then we'll just raise these up. Let's see if that works out. I don't think it's going to be too steep. And then in order to make, I'm going to make another building that kind of encapsulates all this. So let's go back to object. I'm going to add a Bezier shape here. I'm just following kind of the rough outline. We'll fix it in a sec. And then extrude that higher so it blocks. Oops. Accidentally got it going in the wrong direction and I can't change my mouse. But I can do this. Select this face. It's inside out right now. When I just pulled it, I just kind of flopped all the UVs. That's okay. We can select the whole thing. And then you can flip the normals so that they all face outwards like that. This thing is pretty forgiving in terms of modeling. So now I'm going to pull these things into place. So it just kind of works. It's good. This face. Don't want to make it so they can fall down a crack. All right, I think that'll work for now. Yeah, good enough. Okay, so the camera that we have, the single camera, oh, I need to add all of these to the collision so that they don't. So we're going to add those to we'll just add them to environments. Got to go to our navigation. Right now we don't have them set up as static, so let's select them all, and that needs to be part of navigation as well. Set them all to navigation static and walkable. And here we need to make sure they're all in environments. And then we can just bake. And then you see how it's baked the mesh to create a nav walkable area for all of this. So with that set up, if we take our mesh, our camera here, we just have the one camera set up, and we bake. If we tell him to go, we can't tell him to go behind this. But even if we did, so we can click anywhere, but we can't tell them to go back here because the camera can itself move. We have no other options for cameras, so we literally can't see the point where we want to click. So what we need to do to get this to work is add some more cameras to our Clearshot. To do that, you just select the Clearshot camera and then add a plus here. So we got a CMVCam2, and you can name these whatever you like. So we'll put this camera somewhere so that it's at a better option for getting him started in the scene. The trick will be, you have to kind of play around with this a little bit, but did I put, so the look at is actually on this VCam1. I'm going to break that and put it in the Clearshot. So that everything targets. So the problem is then you can't see that this is going to look at him when it's chosen, but it will. I'm going to put it just out of sight, and we'll try playing just so you can see the cut. We'll see which one it picks. So it chose this one. As we move him over here though, oh, I forgot to put a collision on that. So when you add a camera, our VCam2, down at the bottom, you need to make sure you set it to collide against environment and avoid obstacles. And notice it says avoid obstacles requires a look at target. That's true. These don't have a look at target. We'll see if we need to add them to it. The parent does. Oh, it does not. Don't know if it's not holding it or. Okay, now it's working. Yeah, the parent didn't, for whatever reason, hold that target. So if we hit play, let's see which one it picks. So there he is. If we move him closer, still not working. Where's my VCam2? Right now it's set to preserve camera height. Oh, it's colliding against environments, avoiding obstacles. This is where it starts to get a little complicated, but the point is, there's a couple of things that could be wrong here. We can set it to preserve camera distance, and there can be a preference for distance. Right now there's no optimal target distance. So if we set this one, say the optimal target distance is like 10 or 15. Let's do 10. And set this one to 5, something smaller. It's giving them something to go on in terms of selecting the shot for preference. So like this one likes to be further away, and this one will look when it's closer. Let's see if that worked. So there's the shot. There. Let's see how it swapped back. There's no forgiving, so there was a point where it was sort of like 5 was fine in the shot in the target, but it's when he got too close, then it left that range. So this is again where it has to get tricky. We can set the preference. You can play around with this, like you can pull camera forward or preserve camera distance for that one. Let's see if it swaps. When we go closer. So one of the things, this is just a tricky shot preference. It's doing that. Maybe if we move this further back, we can get him into the scene, into this area more, so that we can then click further and allow other cameras to have the choice. You just want this as sort of a start shot. Let's try it now. So now it's holding that shot because he's not so far, so close that we can lose the shot back to the other camera. And now that we're blocked completely, we can then move through this scene. The problem now is, again, because of our camera shot selection, it took a couple of clicks for us to get to a point where we could click on the ground further into the scene. So this is just where you have to kind of get tricky in your camera positioning. So we're going to make this further back. Make sure, and it's going to give us kind of an optimal look. It's going to be this corner cam shot. And that'll give us that sort of around the corner camera preference. We might move it a little bit up higher so that when he goes under this obstacle, there might be a camera over here, which we will now add. That will take over further down the shot. So if we select VCam, we'll move it sort of back into here, maybe around the corner. And this is, again, this is where you're going to have to play around with the settings to get it tweaked just right so that it performs the way you want it to. So let's see what happens now. Click into here. So I had to click further, so that kind of tells you that it's not optimal because he's still in the shot. So what we want to do is go and select. This camera is so far away now that it's so far away that that's distance that I set on it wasn't optimal anymore. So let's do 10. Let's try that. See if it's able to take over when it gets closer. So now it holds. Let's go back out. I just want to see if, like, where it chooses to hold. So yeah, he's got to get too far in there in order to find the shot. So in some ways, this camera position right here just isn't working. We need to be able to see further into the scene in order to get him close enough so that the next camera can take over. So let's try that. All right, so now we can go pretty much anywhere. Interesting that it tried to do that shot. But now we can get in there. See, we can go in there and it takes over. It's interesting again that it finds this shot because we left the optimal distance. So let's change this to something like 5 and this to 5 and see. Sorry. Preserve camera distance. Let's just do preserve camera height. This one. Preserve camera height. Let's see what happens. So it holds. Let's just see if we move them in the zone. This is where you have to kind of like just test it out. Coming this way, does it go? It's kind of like security cam footage, right? So that took the shot where the one camera got blocked. And this is where you can have a lot of these cameras. You're going to want to sort of set them up in as many places as possible to see which cameras are preferred. See, there's a bad shot. It can't get a good shot from the other, and this camera gets blocked by the height. So you need something that's not going to block you. So probably move this here. Let's put it a little bit lower. I like the low to the ground shots. We'll keep that one high just because I want it to be able to be blocked. But I'm also going to put one from here that's low and see which way it chooses the shot. So if we go back to our Clearshot, add another. This will be CMV Chem 4, and you might want to end up naming these at some point so that you know what stands for what, because you can see where this VCAM 1, VCAM 2 stuff's not going to work after a while. So I'm basically just getting it so that it's low to the ground. It gives me a shot that could be interesting. And now he's in there. Go here. I need to set that camera up for its collision. Every time you add a new camera, it's going to have the collision is going to need to be set up, unfortunately. So obstacles, make sure this VCAM 3 has the same. Yep. All right, let's try that again. Go in. I'm not sure why that one's not picking up. Could be its distance. Might be set to 0. Has no preference. Look out. Every time I add a new camera. No? It may want those lookouts on the actual cameras themselves, so unfortunately it's a little extra step, but it may help if we add it there. So if you, let's do that. Oh, that one had it. Okay, let's try it. So there's that shot. It really doesn't want to work. Use that VCam 4. Why? This guy. VCam 4. His camera targets, collision, preserve camera height, preserve camera distance perhaps. Make it 5. It could be because its optimal distance is set to something low. Okay, so now it's preferred that shot. Now it goes to this shot, back to here, which again isn't optimal because now I can't go backwards, but from this shot I can. Which I might want another shot up there, and then it swapped back. So that's that camera distance. So if we set that to 4, or 3, so it's got to be closer. And this one 5. Be nice if you got some visible indicator of sort of its collision space and preference in terms of like a collision sphere around it or something, so we could sort of see what we're actually targeting as opposed to having to guess based on a number. That would help a lot. Why does that guy keep moving? Preserve camera distance. Let's see what happens. It may be that we need a camera here that'll target for a long shot. So like, let me show you what I mean. If we set, I think I'm starting to understand what's going on here. So if we go add a shot, this will be VCam 5. Needs to target him, his camera target. Here's that camera. I'm going to make it low. But I'm going to make its preferred distance something really long, like 10. We'll use the environment and set it to avoid obstacles. Let's just double check our others. Yeah, let's see. I think by making it longer, it won't favor him when he's close, but it'll swap to that long shot. See how close he is? So now he's here, and it's gone back to there. But now it's swapped to the long shot when he was that far away. So it was long. So in other words, this is working. This camera almost becomes unnecessary. It's extra because this one will work for that preference. Perhaps we move this further down. Why we're losing our camera there, I don't know. Follow target. Let's try it again. So there's our security cam. We're close to the camera there, but if we want to go over here, then it gives us the long shot down that way. So we've picked our path, and then it goes close up just for a second because this distance, this camera is only set to 3, so let's do it for could do 10 since it's for there'll be a handoff halfway between this and this, so we can move this further back, put it over in the corner and low, so maybe he does like a flyover. Let's try that again. There's our security cam. If we go that way, we can click here and we get picked up at some point by, again, this camera. So if we go further in here, it should prefer, wow, this camera's not picking up anymore. This one. Just trying to move it. So it does give you some indication of a shot and a path. What's this distance? Oh, I don't have an optimal distance. That's why I didn't pick it up. So let's make this 5. And let's see now. So yeah, that optimal distance is important. It takes a little playing and a couple of cameras to try to get it set up finally once you start to get them to juggle. So if we go down this way, that picks it up low. If we go over here, it'll hand off. Then we can go here and we'll have another camera around the corner to pick it up. So now if we come back here, we can go back. Security cam picks it up. And then we can come around and go this way. And it'll swap back. Yeah, there's too much juggling there. We need to give one like control preference. They overlap too much with each other, so this one, it's VCAM 4. Setting it to 10's not right, so we should set it to like 5 maybe. Let's see. You kind of want to get it so that it has no choice, this camera that's around the corner here. The security cam picks it up. It can't, the long camera won't choose him until he gets down there. So there it chooses him. So now when we move further that way, then this still juggles. Why? So one of the things you can do to avoid that is while he's moving, the in-camera juggle while he's moving, is give these cameras a minimum amount of time to hold. So there's this, oh, this one's also set to preserve camera height. Notice it's doing this cast array. So let's do preserve camera distance. And oh, the up here in the actual Clearshot camera, there'll be this minimum duration for each camera to hold. So if you set that to something like 3, and try that. Security cam picks them up. Calling this one the security cam because it kind of acts like one the way it rotates around a corner. So now if we go long, see how it held on him longer and it won't swap back to the long shot. So then we can pick him up further there. So by giving that thing a little bit of a duration to hold, it allows him to move in a way that will prevent that other camera that has a similar angle from being considered and picked up until it's really optimal. It kind of gives them a little bit of time to think about it. So hopefully this makes some sense. I'm going to go and set these up in a way that allows them to get up to the top up here. So let's add a new Clearshot camera. Cam 6. We'll put it up around the corner. You have to just kind of think about what's going to make a good shot and the best place to put it so that it can hand off to the next one in line. So these sort of overlap, but distance-wise they may work. So we want to collide against environment, obstacles, set a distance. We'll do 5. Seems to work okay. Preserve camera height. We'll do preserve camera distance. And see if that works. It was interesting that the this camera picked up so short. So there's that shot. Let's see if it picks him up. That's good. Yep. Then we can head up the hill. So then we'll have another camera that picks them up there. Maybe we do like a high shot. Let's see, clear shots. Add another. You can also give these priorities so that they're favored over others. So they might be the default camera under certain hard to choose situations. I haven't really played around with that one as much. So I'm going to make another kind of security cam that can be picked up. So it'll look down on him going up the slope. You also may want to think about your gameplay. Excuse me. Depending on what's going on here. So maybe some ball comes down or something. You may want a high shot if you're running from something, or you want to do some sort of cinematic approach. You may want to have a low shot. So let's make that collide with environment. Avoid obstacles. Set a camera distance preference. Let's try 5 and see. And let's see what happens. Maybe too much. Oh, it swapped back. So if we click up here, you can get up there, come back. Oh. So now this is where you've gotten it set up, or I've gotten it set up to kind of fail, because he's close enough that the distance likes the shot, but it makes it hard to click in a way that will make him, so if he stands on the corner, some of these cameras that are up higher may have a preference, like there. But it looks like you can still click over here and get him to follow. That's not intuitive. So what does that mean? I'm here. I may want to give another preference, another camera that's closer so I can look along here. So we'll put one here, but make it so that it's not able to see him until he gets to this point. And we make sure that its distance is relatively short so it can't overlap with the security camera. So set for environment, obstacles, give it a 5 on the distance, or maybe a 4. And see how that works. Did I target? No. Cam target. Let's make sure the one before, no, it doesn't either. And that one didn't either. Okay, so let's try. So anyway, you get the idea that we've got a point and click player now. He can collide with objects. We can pop up dialogues. If we wanted to swap from this camera, this Clearshot camera setup, to a third person action cam for certain shots, we could, because all we'd have to do is just turn off or activate the Clearshot, deactivate the Clearshot and activate a third person camera in the spots that we wanted it. So we might have him like walk up here, interacting with objects. If we get this, this is tricky because where I've set this, it's really hard to move forward because of his preference. So by clicking there, I have to go further back, and then I'd have to click here to get him to even start to go. So it's a bad kind of mismatch. Let's see if it holds when I get him up to the edge. So it's a good camera for that shot. This is a really nice view. I've made it right on the spot where I wanted to transition, and I can't quite get him to do there, so I just need to move this over here into this corner, so that which means, I lose my, I may want to put it up a little higher. I lose this corner shot here, but maybe one of these cameras will find it better. So let's see. And some of these cameras could use some work in terms of positioning in the long shot. You may want more cameras. Here's another one where it's an example. I can make the turn easily enough, and it's got this nice shot looking up the hill. This one is okay for navigation, not necessarily the most interesting shot. This one is good because I can go out here. Let's see if it still holds preference. It doesn't. So I need to make its distance something like 6. Let's see what happens. The other thing you can play around with is the composition on each one of these so that they don't necessarily, depending on the camera, you can shift it right or left. To make a more cinematic composition. So it takes over well. Let's see if it holds when it gets to the edge. Yeah, that's good. So for some reason I get them over here, it still holds, but then that shot takes over, which is good. And that doesn't bug me too much. And we get good navigation here, so let's get him to stand on the corner and see if there's some preference. It's good. It's all good. All right, so there's your point and click. You know, it works really well. Like the camera, it takes a little time to get these Clearshot cameras set up. Once you do, though, they kind of do what they, their job fairly well. Another thing you can do that's interesting with them is make a transition so that if we select this Clearshot, and if you don't want cuts, you can change those cuts to ease in, ease outs that happen over a certain amount of time. So let's make it 2 seconds. And let's try that. And this may or may not work in this particular situation because we have these cliff-like setups where you don't want the camera to... Let's see, that one was nice. Let's see what happens here. Okay, so it goes back. Went through a wall there, but see, that kind of bouncing is not what you want. Again, went through a wall. So it kind of works. It would take some different setups to get it to, some of these can be a little bit roller coastery in terms of how they take over the camera. That flyover mode's kind of too virtual reality quadcopter, but that one was good. So it's an alternative way of doing the navigation. Cuts can work just as well. In some ways, those transitions can be too hovery. So play around. There's different options. And like I said, I'll put the scripts up on in the comments. Play around with Probuilder, and you kind of saw just a handful of what it could do in terms of being able to quickly mock up these level designs. You can do a lot more with it. So let me save this scene. I'll just show you one that I'm working on. If you wanted to import objects, you can actually convert them to Probuilder scenes. So I've got the Planet Express here, and I'm working on some scene setups. The thing I really like about Probuilder is the way it'll set up the UVs, kind of automatic, and you can build off of that. Complex shapes like this, it's not so friendly with, but you can go into a tool like Blender and model this using the booleans in Blender, fix it up, kind of edit it so that all the points, it doesn't have a bunch of extra points, and then export it as an OBJ file, because Probuilder can't Probuilderize an FBX. There's a difference in the UV count. But once you export it as an OBJ, if you put it in your Unity folder, you can bring that in, and then you get this, you can select the object, and under Probuilder, there's this Probuilderized. This one's already been Probuilderized, and it just converts it to something that you can do. You can then edit again more in Probuilder. So if I wanted to extrude out from that, I could. So anyway, it's you can do a lot more with Probuilder than just these simple prototyping tools. You can actually use it in your game, and it does a really good job of being able to keep the geometry light, but at the same time having this kind of nice UV 1-to-1 ratio, so you can texture things fairly easily as well. So anyway, hope you liked the video. If you have any questions, just leave them in the comments.